The mic is hot. Let's break this down. Usually when the government wants to strip away the rights of 50 individual states to govern themselves, they at least have the decency to try and pass a law first. They usually try to get Congress to vote on it. They make a big show of democracy. But what happened on December 8th? That wasn't democracy. That was a hostile takeover. I need you to look past the headlines about innovation and winning the AI race. That is the shiny object they are dangling in front of you. While everyone is arguing about whether AI is woke or whether it's going to take your job, the Trump White House just quietly walked into the room, locked the doors, and declared that your state governor, whether you voted for them or not, is officially fired from the conversation. Here is the reality that isn't making the nightly news. Congress refused to give the president this power. Did you know that? They tried to sneak a preemption clause into the NDAA, the defense bill, and lawmakers said no. Republicans and Democrats both said, we aren't comfortable deleting state laws just yet. So what did the president do? He ignored them. He signed an executive order that doesn't just encourage national standards, it weaponizes the Department of Justice to sue your state into submission. They literally created something called the AI Litigation Task Force. Think about that. Your tax dollars are now funding a team of federal lawyers whose specific job is to attack your state safety laws. Why? Because California, Colorado, and Massachusetts were actually trying to pass safety rules. They wanted to make sure companies couldn't just scrape your face, your voice, and your data without asking. And big tech? They hated that. They went to D.C. and said, please give us one rule. One weak federal rule is so much cheaper for us than 50 strong ones. And on Monday, they got exactly what they paid for. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, I like federal standards, it's less confusing, you are missing the point. The ceiling just became the floor. The federal government just decided that their bare minimum is the maximum protection you are allowed to have. This is a massive shift in power, away from you, away from your state, and directly into the hands of a few unelected agencies and the trillion-dollar companies they are supposed to be regulating. The check engine light is flashing red, guys. And I'm going to show you exactly what happens when you let the fox design the henhouse. To understand why this executive order is such a nuclear option, you have to understand the mess we were living in before Monday. We had what the industry calls a patchwork. California had the Safe AI Act, which was super strict. Basically, if you build a model that kills someone or helps make a bioweapon, you go to jail. Colorado had their own discrimination laws. Utah had weird social media stuff. It was messy, sure, but it was democracy. It was states acting as the laboratories of democracy, which is literally what they teach you in 8th grade civics. But Silicon Valley? They hated it. Imagine you are trying to sell a car, but California says it needs 4 wheels, Texas says it needs 6 wheels, and New York bans wheels entirely. That is the nightmare big tech was facing. They were bleeding money trying to comply with 50 different rulebooks. So, for the last year, the CEOs of OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, they have been camping out in Washington. They weren't lobbying for no regulation, that's a rookie mistake. They were lobbying for federal regulation. Why? Because if the feds pass a law, it triggers something called preemption. It's a legal concept that basically says federal law eats state law. It's the supremacy clause. If Congress says the speed limit is 55, Montana can't say, actually, it's 90. But here is the catch, and this is the part that makes this week so shady. Congress didn't pass the law. The lobbyists tried. They pushed for the American AI Act all year, but it stalled. Why? Because Democrats like Ed Markey said, we aren't going to let you preempt California unless the federal law is just as strong as California's. And Republicans? A lot of them are old-school states' rights guys. They don't want Washington telling Florida what to do. So the bill died. The democratic process worked. The patchwork survived. And that brings us to December 8th, the catalyst.
President Trump looked at that gridlock and said, "I don't care." He didn't wait for a bill. He didn't wait for a vote. He used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or a similar interpretation of National Security Authority, to declare that AI is a strategic asset, like oil or nuclear material. And because it's a national security issue now, he argues he doesn't need Congress to override the states. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, so what? Who cares if California gets slapped down? Their laws are crazy anyway. I get it. I hear you. But let me tell you why you should care, even if you hate California policies. When the federal government preempts state law, they usually set a floor. That means you must be at least this safe. But if you want to be safer, go ahead. This executive order doesn't set a floor, it sets a ceiling. It says you cannot be safer than this.
If your state wants to pass a law saying police cannot use AI to scan your license plate without a warrant, and the federal one rule says it's fine, your state law is void. Poof, gone. They're selling this as unleashing innovation. They're saying we have to do this to beat China. We can't have red tape slowing us down. And look, I want to beat China too. I don't want the CCP writing the code for the 21st century. But let's look at the data. Is safety regulation really what's holding us back? The US is already leading in AI investment by miles. The chips are here, the talent is here. The idea that having to check for algorithmic bias in Colorado is going to cause us to lose World War III is, well, it's a stretch. What this is actually about is liability. The one rule isn't just a sword to attack states, it's a shield for corporations. If they comply with the federal, weaker standard, they're safe. You can't sue them in state court because the state law doesn't exist anymore. So they presented this as a patriotic move to save America's tech edge, but when you peel back the sticker, it looks a lot more like a get-out-of-jail-free card for the companies that just donated millions to the inauguration fund. And the worst part? They know this is going to end up in the Supreme Court. They know it might be unconstitutional, but by the time the court rules in 2027, the AI models will already be deployed, the infrastructure will already have been built, and the states will already have lost the momentum. They're breaking the system on purpose, hoping they can build a new one before anyone stops them. And wait until you see how they plan to enforce this, because if you thought the task force was bad, wait until you see what they're doing with the money.
Okay, take a breath. We've covered the what, the executive order. We've covered the why, the desperate race to beat China and the lobbying dollars from big tech. But now I need you to lean in because we are going to talk about the how. This is the part where the mechanics get dirty. This is the part they count on you being too bored to understand. But you're not boring, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. I want you to imagine you own a house. You worked hard for it. It's your sanctuary. And because you want to keep your family safe, you decide to install a high-end security system. You put cameras on the porch, deadbolts on the doors, maybe a sensor on the window. That is your right as a homeowner, correct? Now imagine the Homeowners Association, the HOA, kicks down your door. They don't just say, hey, that camera is ugly. They say you are legally forbidden from locking your front door. Why? Because the HOA signed a deal with a delivery company. Let's call them Amazon Prime on steroids. And this delivery company says we can deliver packages 30% faster if your drivers don't have to fumble with keys or wait for you to unlock the door. We need frictionless entry into every home in the neighborhood to maximize efficiency. So the HOA says for the good of the neighborhood's economy, locks are banned. Speed is the priority. Safety is an obstacle. That is exactly what is happening with this executive order. Your state, whether it's California, Texas, or Ohio, is the homeowner. They want to put locks on the door. They want to say, hey, AI company, you can't scan the retinas of children in our schools without parental consent. That's a lock. The federal government is the HOA, and they have decided that innovation, the delivery speed, matters more than your ability to lock the door. But here is where it gets truly diabolical. The mechanism they are using to enforce this isn't just a stern letter, it's financial blackmail. I mentioned the spending power earlier. Let's nerd out on this for a second because it is the most powerful weapon in the White House arsenal. The Supreme Court has ruled in the past that the feds can't just force states to pass laws. That's called commandeering, and it's unconstitutional. But they can bribe them. Or rather, they can threaten them. In this executive order, the Trump administration has linked AI regulatory preemption to federal broadband and infrastructure grants. You remember the billions of dollars allocated to get high-speed internet to rural farmers in Iowa, to inner-city schools in Detroit, to the mountains of West Virginia? That money is now the hostage. The order effectively says to the governors, oh, you want to keep your strict AI safety law? That's fine, that's your state's right. But if you do, we are cutting off the grant money for your rural internet expansion. Good luck explaining to your voters why they still have dial-up speeds while the next state over has fiber. It is a catch-22 designed to crush resistance. If a governor fights for your privacy, they lose the money to build the future economy. If they take the money, they have to surrender their right to protect you from AI harms. They are stuck. If they turn left, they hit a wall. If they turn right, they drive off a cliff. And the administration knows this. They are banking on the fact that no governor can afford to turn down billions in infrastructure cash. But wait, it gets worse. I know, I keep saying that, but I promise we're drilling down to the bedrock here. Let's talk about the legal argument they're going to use when the states inevitably sue, because the states will sue. You don't take California's authority away without a fight. The DOJ task force is going to walk into court and slap down a card called the Dormant Commerce Clause. Sounds boring, right? It sounds like something you slept through in 11th grade, but it is the nuclear launch code for the American economy. The Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate interstate commerce, trade between states. Over the last 100 years, the courts have expanded that definition to mean basically everything. If you grow wheat in your backyard to feed your own family, the feds can regulate it because technically, by not buying wheat on the market, you are affecting the national price of wheat. That is a real Supreme Court case, Wickard versus Filburn. Look it up. Now apply that logic to artificial intelligence. AI doesn't exist in one state. ChatGPT doesn't live in San Francisco. It lives in the cloud. It lives on servers in Virginia, trained on data from New York, served to a user in Kansas. It is the definition of interstate commerce. So the Trump DOJ is going to argue, Your Honor, California cannot regulate AI because AI is inherently national. If California passes a rule saying AI models have to be fair, that forces a company in Texas to change its code. Therefore, California is illegally interfering with the national economy. And you know what's the scary part is? They might win. If the Supreme Court agrees with that logic, it's game over for state privacy laws. It establishes that data is a national commodity, like oil or corn, and only the president, gets to decide how it flows. I need you to understand the domino effect here. This isn't just about whether ChatGPT can write a poem. If they can use the interstate commerce excuse to preempt state AI safety laws, what comes next? Gig work? California tried to pass laws giving Uber drivers benefits. The feds could use this same logic. Gig apps are national platforms. States can't regulate them. Boom. Labor rights gone. Crypto? Blockchain is a national network. New York can't regulate it. Boom. Financial protections gone. Rent control? Housing markets affect the national economy. Do you see the slippery slope? It's not a slope, it's a cliff. We are watching the centralization of power in Washington, D.C. at a speed we haven't seen since the New Deal. But this time, it's not to build dams or Social Security. It's to clear the runway for big tech. And this brings us to the most dangerous part of the mechanism, the black box. The core disagreement between the states and the feds isn't just about power, it's about transparency. The state laws, like the ones in Colorado, were demanding audits. They wanted companies to open up the hood of the car and show us the engine. They wanted to know, why did your AI deny this person a loan? Was it because they are black? Was it because they are a woman? Show us the math. The federal one-rule approach, it focuses on outcome-based regulation. It says, we don't need to see the code, we just need you to promise it works. It's the difference between a health inspector walking into a restaurant kitchen to check for rats versus the restaurant just posting a sign in the window saying, we promise our food is clean. The executive order effectively bans the health inspector. So we're flying blind. We're entering the most disruptive technological era in human history. Automation, deepfakes, algorithmic warfare, and the government just turned off the headlights to save battery power. I know, it sounds crazy. I wish I was making this up. I wish I was reading a script from a cyberpunk dystopia, but I'm reading the Federal Register. And here is the point of no return. This is the moment where the concrete sets. If this order stands for even 2 years, the damage is permanent. Why? Because AI models are trained on data, massive, unimaginable amounts of data. Right now, companies are hesitant to scrape certain types of sensitive data because they are afraid to get sued by Illinois, which has strict biometric laws, or California. But if the one rule order passes and preempts those state laws, the floodgates open. They will scrape everything. Your medical records, your facial geometry, your voice prints, your movement patterns. They will feed it all into the maw of the machine to build GPT-6 or whatever comes next. And once that data is in the model, you can't get it out. You cannot unteach an AI. If a model learns to recognize your face and link it to your credit score because it scraped data during this deregulated window, that capability exists forever, even if a future president reverses the order, even if Congress passes a law in 2030. The egg is scrambled. You cannot put it back in the shell. We are standing on the precipice of the Great Scrape, and the federal government just handed the tech giants a shovel and said, dig as deep as you want, nobody is allowed to stop you. So, that's the mechanism. That's how the machine works. They use your tax dollars to blackmail your governor, they use the courts to silence your local laws, and they use the national security card to hide the fact that they are selling your privacy to the highest bidder. But what happens when this actually hits the fan? What does the world look like 5 years from now if this one rule becomes the only rule? Grab your helmet. We're going to look at the fallout. So, where does this leave us? We've looked at the order, we've looked at the trap they set for the states, and we've looked at the dark logic of total centralization. Now I want to play out the tape. I want to show you what your Tuesday morning looks like in this new world. Best case scenario, the optimists are right. The one rule works. By removing the red tape, American companies sprint ahead. We get AI doctors that are cheaper and better. We get fusion energy managed by supercomputers. We beat China to the punch, and the American economy booms so hard that we forget we ever cared about state privacy laws. I truly hope that happens. I want that to happen. But I'm not paid to sell you fairy tales. I'm here to look at the ugly truth. And the ugly truth is that when you remove checks and balances, you don't get utopia. You get feudalism. If this executive order holds, we are moving toward a system of algorithmic redlining. Imagine it's 2027. You apply for health insurance. The company uses an AI model to scan your data, not just your medical history, but your grocery receipts, your gym attendance, your social media posts. The AI decides you are high risk because you bought too much processed food and your voice stress levels were high on a customer service call. Your premium triples. In the old world, the world before Monday, you could complain to your state insurance commissioner. Your state might have a law banning the use of grocery data for insurance pricing. But in the new world, that state law is gone, preempted. You call your state rep and they say, sorry, federal preemption, we have no jurisdiction. So you call the federal agency in DC, the one that set the one rule, you get a voicemail. You are one of 350 million people trying to reach a single office.
That is the future we are building, a future where the decisions that determine your life, your loan, your job, your insurance are made by a black box in a server farm, protected by a federal shield that no local lawyer can penetrate. It is the ultimate unappealable decision. And let's look even further. 2030. If the states lose the power to police AI, they lose the power to police the police. We are seeing AI drones, AI surveillance, AI predicting crimes before they happen. Cities like San Francisco and Boston banned facial recognition because the technology was flawed. It was arresting innocent people, usually minorities. But under the one rule logic, if the federal government says facial recognition is vital for national security, then Boston's ban is unconstitutional. Suddenly, you have cameras on every corner in every small town, feeding data into a central federal database. Not because your town voted for it, but because a bureaucrat in D.C. signed a contract with a defense contractor and overrode your mayor. It is the death of local control. It is the end of the idea that a community gets to decide its own values. So, what do we do? I know this feels heavy. I know you want to throw your phone across the room, but panic is not a strategy. Action is. First, you need to understand the battlefield. The war isn't over. It has just moved to the courtroom. The most important people in America right now are not the president and not the senators. They are the state attorneys general. The AGs from California, New York, Texas, and Florida, yes, even the conservative ones who care about states' rights, are the only firewall left. They are going to sue. They are going to take this to the Supreme Court. Your job? Make noise. Call your governor. Tell them, do not take the broadband money if it means signing away our rights. Fight the lawsuit. Give them political cover to say no to the cash. Second, practice data defense. If the law won't protect your data, you have to. Stop feeding the beast. Use tools that poison your images so AI can't train on them. Look up Nightshade or Glaze. Be boring on the internet. Use cash. If they want to build a surveillance state, make it expensive for them. Make your data garbage. And finally, don't let them gaslight you. When you see the ads next week talking about American innovation and a new era of tech, remember what they aren't saying. They aren't telling you about the rights you lost. They aren't telling you about the preemption. They are hoping you'll be dazzled by the shiny robot while they steal the keys to your house. You are smarter than that. You are paying attention. This isn't about technology, it's about power. And for the first time in a long time, the mask is completely off. I'll be tracking the lawsuits as they file. I'll let you know which states fold and which ones fight. But for now, keep your eyes open. The mic is off. Stay safe out there.